Hello, everyone. Today, our topic is IBM Security Verify, Data Privacy, and Consent Management. Speaker for today is Tushar.
Okay, hello everyone. I'll start talking about the agenda first, and then as we progress, I'll cover the later slides. So, what is this session about? Okay, this session is about knowing what is data privacy and consent management, knowing what are the challenges organizations are facing, why these regulations are in picture now, why there is focus on that, and then we are going to look into what are the data privacy and consent management concepts related to IBM Verify. We are going to see some demonstration around EULA, privacy rules, purpose of use, and a particular use case, and some point of integration that IBM Verify offers. Okay, so this is what is there in the agenda. We are going to cover current challenges, then some concepts around data privacy and consent, more in-depth concepts are around Verify, how IBM Verify is a powerful consent management engine, and then point of integration, and then a demonstration. And at the end of the session, I'll be sharing some of the resources which will be useful to you. With that, let's move on to the next slide. As you can see in the picture, privacy regulations are being established and it's being developed. These laws are complex and they change because there's demand for privacy. And it's not like by 2024 or this year, 75% of the global population will have its personal data covered. So you expect how much focus is on the data privacy by the regulatory bodies. And there are steep fines, there are monetary losses if those are not met. Okay, so there are some if those compliance are not taken care. So that's what we are going to see in the next slide. So how did it come in picture? Okay, data privacy and the management, consent management. What are the origination of it? Are data principal rights origination of data privacy and consent management? Let's take a look into it. So if I talk about before discussing about data principal rights, 10 years ago or like when I was in college, I used to access websites, and the number one priority for me at that time was to just remember the password and don't worry about putting in your email address, your mobile number, or other address information without worrying about their privacy requirement. And then over a period of time, organizations found a way to use those information to advertise it. Okay, use those information to share without our approval or consent. Okay, so that led to data principal rights. So let's see what are the data principal rights. The first one is right to information. So as an individual, people need to know how their data is processed, stored, used at any point of time. Then if the data is incorrect, if you found it to be incorrect, there should be an easy way to correct it. So that's your right to correction and erasure. Right to grievance redressal. You can raise your complaints and that needs to be addressed. And then right to nominate. So in case of some unseen circumstances, how do you do a nomination around it? So these are the data principal rights which came in picture, and then the focus came around data privacy and consent management. So let's go back at the enterprise pain points. Okay, so we know that data privacy laws are evolving, and there is a need to balance rapid application development and its compliance with data privacy and consent laws. And violation of data privacy regulations don't only have monetary costs, it has brand reputation at stake as well. So enterprise needs to address these challenges, and there are three things that they struggle with. One is complex and complex regulatory compliance, which are changing and needs proper enforcement. You can't do away with that. And then second one is there is siloed interaction. So I will explain you in later slide what does it mean. So there is not a common language, or there is not an easy way for both data privacy officers and developers to when data privacy officers given their requirement that should be easily consumable by developers. So there is siloed interactions. And then the lack of transparency, and a lot of times business cannot determine what is the exact amount of information that is to be collected. They can't collect too much of information or too less of an information. So keeping that in picture, these are the enterprise pain points. And then I will take you to the next slide, which this pain points converge to the personas and what difficulties personas are facing. So in this, I have four personas. One is risk compliance officer, another one is developer, and then business owner and consumer. So what is the problem around the data privacy officer or risk and compliance officer? Obviously, privacy laws are complex and they are changing, and they have to make sure that organizations are aligned with the privacy laws. Then developer is very difficult for them to incorporate those changing laws into the application, and that's one of the challenge. And business also have to make sure they're not over collecting data or not under collecting data, and all these leads to not a very good experience for the user. Okay, so this affects the user experience apart from the non-compliance, which can lead to brand reputations issues or monetary losses to the organization. So what is the solution for this? And that is why we are all in this today's session. We are going to look at something which is going to solve this problem, and that we call as a very powerful privacy and consent management engine that comes with IBM Verify Security SaaS. So it's a Verify SaaS is an identity as a service. It's a modern IAM SaaS solution which supports SSO, MFA, and a lot of other features. And privacy and consent management is key to it. And that is the topic of discussion in today's session. So Verify SaaS takes away siloed interaction and provides a very convenient and focused view for data privacy officer, where they can focus on data privacy rules, can author privacy rules, purposes, and then developer just has to consume it using SDK. That's what we are going to look in the next slide, how the personas that we discussed in earlier slide get a solution and get a transformed view by using the data privacy consent engine of the Verify. So we have the same personas. Now this is a streamlined workflow across stakeholders. Why? Because privacy consent rules in Verify SaaS is controlled by the risk compliance officer, continuously updated by them using a simplified view. And then there are simple APIs which developers can fetch to get the latest consent logic. So removing the silos of interaction between the compliance officer and developer. And then line of business owner is also happy, as there is rules which are required to just ensure that right amount of data is collected. Eventually, that's leading to a very enhanced user experience and very happy customer. So with that, let's look into the IBM Verify data privacy and consent management. So we'll just start with uh, a basic definition of consent management, which is a legal requirement to collect, protect, and safeguard personal information. There are a few examples: DPDP Act in India, GDPR in European Union, CCPA in California, PDPA in Singapore. And these are the few regulatory laws that has definitions around consents and how they need to be managed, stored, processed. Okay, and any consent management engine should abide by that with an integration with application. So before we go further, we need to also understand what are the consents. Okay, we in our day-to-day life we visit sites and we often see a lot of prompts coming in. So basically some examples of consents that we see is granular consents, which are lot detailed consents, detail upon why they are collected, what is they use, and what are whether they are shared or not. And the examples we see maybe consent, cookie consent banners, purpose-based consent. So one example you see in the picture that that shows how and what is the purpose of these cookies. Then we see some explicit consent where the information is very specific. For example, in this case, there is there is a checkbox where you agree to share your email address with a third party for marketing. Okay, sometimes it is not clearly specified whether it's a third party or not. Then there are implicit and implied consent, wherein you just access the services, and then it's assumed that you have consented to the website's policies or terms of use. User doesn't explicitly opt in or does not have an opt out option or deny option in this case. Maybe not used a lot of places, or they need, if they may be a slighter easy or relaxed form of consent in this case. Then there are opt-in consents that we see a lot, like whenever you do some login or some checkout work or some transaction processing, you see a checkbox where you say, okay, I accept to use. So where there's a checkbox, you can say it's an opt-in consent. You also have, like, you might have subscribed to newsletters, and then if you don't want those newsletters delivered to your email address, you have to uncheck the box. There'll be an opt-out consent. Okay. So these I discussed are the generic consent types. Okay, what I want you to focus on, these consent types which are specific to Verify SaaS, and it caters to the need of regulatory compliance, whether it's GDPR or CCPA, other type of regulatory compliance. So one of the consent type in Verify SaaS is consent required user consent, which is a standard user consent where you need to accept before you try to, or before you can use the service. It's kind of an allow or deny based consent. Then there are two opt-in or opt-out consent type in Verify SaaS. We discuss opt-in. You have a checkbox we can check in to opt-in, or there is a checkbox you can check out to opt-out from the consent, which is a stronger form of consent. And then you have a transparency only show purpose, where the user is informed about the purpose of the consent, and they just accept it and access the service. So there is no option to opt out from these consent types. So these are the consent types that you will see in Verify SaaS, and that we are going to see in our demo. The next thing is very interesting because I like. So any guesses what is on the left side in red flag? So I am a shopping enthusiast, so I love to buy clothes when I see a lot of discounts. So I'm a kind of consumer who would like to have such offers sent to me, right? Then I can go buy clothes. So for this use case, what is the purpose of use? What is the purpose here? 50% off. The purpose here is marketing. So I'm making sure my goods are sold. So there is an offer, and if that is offer is sent to the end users, the sale will increase. The purpose for the organization is marketing. Okay, marketing of the offer. Then how are you going to send these offers? Here I have taken email address as an example, which is an attribute or database. You can use an email address and use that email address to send the offer to the end users. And who is going to dictate like how these are to be collected from the user? That we call it as policy rules. And these are the rules which you can, which gets directly derived from the GDPR, CCPA, or data privacy rules officers who will be writing these rules to ensure that the consents are collected in compliance with the regulatory rules. Okay. If we go further on that, so I'm taking again as an application example, e-commerce application. So typically how it happens is you just shop something. At the end of if the application needs to collect something, it connects to the verify privacy engine and checks whether this user has already accepted or consented to marketing offers. If not, then just ask user whether you consent or not, and then the user is prompted for a form. So if you see, user is prompted for a form where the user just do and click the checkbox, and here the attribute is email and purpose is marketing. So basically you're allowing access to the email ID for marketing purpose. You are giving this consent to the application. So this is it becomes important that what are the point of integration with the consent management engine. What we have seen is, yes, there are some concepts around verify SaaS, and you can collect consents, you can write rules which conforms to uh, the regulatory rules laid out for the particular region. Okay, but what are the point of integration? So there are 2 point of integration. The point one is where the verify SaaS is the point of enforcement. Like you saw the nice page was presented to the user to collect the consent, like whether allow access to my email for marketing. That was presented from verify SaaS. And verify has its own branding capabilities. You can nicely make that page in a very good layout and present to the customer. So here the point of enforcement is the verify SaaS. It connects to verify consent engine, and when consent is given, it stores there. Okay, so verify SaaS gives the consent pages to the user, collects it, and stores into consent engine. And it also contacts consent engine to make decisions, check the rules. Okay, what is the second point of integration? So second point of integration is, suppose you have an application and where it says, okay, I want to present the form as per the application need, or application needs to control the user experience flow, wherein all the consent decision they want verify consent management engine to make. The verify consent management will evaluate whether consent is present or not. If the consent is provided, store that information. Okay, whether those uh, consents comply with the rules or not. These are all work of consent engine, but the uh, the user experience or pages which are presented to the user are controlled by the application itself. So application makes use of APIs or SDKs for this point of integration. So we are going to have a demo based on integration 1, and we are going to look the integration 2 flow in details. So this is point of integration 1. So if you see, I have there in the picture, you see security verify with OpenID Connect and runtime engine. And then there is a privacy consent engine. Okay. So if you see, user initiates a login, application just sends the login to delegates that to let verify authenticated, and then in that process it sends a request to authorize with scope marketing, which is a purpose / email, which is an attribute. So if you see here is an example how you configure on a relying party how to pass that information. So after that, the runtime engine of verify needs to evaluate whether a user has already whether the consent is there or not there, and what rules it needs to conform based on the configuration. So it assesses it, and then it presents a form to the user. Okay, hey, these are the two consents and there is a need to capture it from the user. So it presents the consent form, and let's say the first one is an example of the marketing purpose. The second one is an example of EULA. And to this, let's say the user says authorize, I authorize both the consent. Then that information is sent to the consent engine, and then a token is provided and user goes through and access the application. So that is point of integration one. Now I talked about point two. So basis of what is the basis of the second point of integration is the rich set of APIs that are made available in the Verify SaaS. So which provides a very good way to interact with Verify privacy and consent management engine. As you can see on the screen, there are APIs available to create, update consent, to check whether consent is approved or not. Basically, these are very, very handy to do the point of integration where application controls the user experience, and they use APIs to do all the and take help of consent management engine to evaluate the consents. So this is the second point of integration flow. And if you see, there is a request by user to log into the application. Application sends an API request to privacy consent engine. And then it says, okay, not approved. Then application, since it controls the user experience, it sends a nice request for authorization. The user approves it or denies it. So in this case, it approves it, authorizes it, and then application, what it does is sends that information to privacy consent engine, and then the token is the request is approved by consent engine, and then user continues to access the system. So that is the second point of integration.